Hope you enjoyed the networking break. Gave you 4 extra minutes than usual. You're so welcome. So, the main event of the night, the LTL panel, all around actionable data insights. I'm sure you've all read the 4 questions online that we're going to be discussing. Lots of nodding heads, not. But Nick is our special surprise guest host, stepped in last minute. So massive round of applause for Nick, please. Nick's going to be leading the discussion. We've got the wonderful Vicky, Jao, James, and Steve. I'll let them introduce themselves. I'm trying to work out where this is going to go. Steve, this one's yours. Nick, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thanks for the surprise opportunity to host this evening. So I'm Nick. I'm the CTO for Kyndryl in the UK and Ireland. So you've just heard my colleague James talking about the platforms that we use to run our business. So I live and breathe some of the stuff that James has to do on a daily basis. So, but that's enough about me. But over to the panelists. So I'm joined by Vicky, who is the founder at Idera. We've got Joao, who is the co-founder at Prompt Bros. Okay, Prompt Bros. James, who I was talking to earlier, who is the general manager at My Tutor, and Steve, CEO at Tap. Lovely to meet you all. Do you all want to give a couple of words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, it's really great to be here. So I left my corporate role in the summer. I worked at Sainsbury's. I've been in tech and data all of my career. And I founded my business Idea because I'm really passionate about getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organizations with a special focus on DE&R.
Hi, I'm Joao, and I also was at Sainsbury's. Actually, is where we met. I founded in the Prompt Pros AI. It is a multi-AI tool that makes AI simple for everyone. So we're not aiming to build one model. We're not aiming to give you one specific tool. We want to solve some of the problems that you have. So agents that you can actually use to either it's in the generation of text or image or video, audio, or where you can actually hook into your own, inference APIs. That is what we give you with no code. And I'm passing over to James, and we're sharing a mic. So here you go.
Yeah.
Seamless. I'm James. I'm general manager at My Tutor. So My Tutor is an online learning company. We do peer-to-peer online learning. I've been at this. I joined about 9 years ago, so I used to call it a startup, but now it's like a legitimate company, I suppose. But my mum still doesn't believe I do a proper job. And before that, I was at dunnhumby and BCG before joining My Tutor.
Good evening. My name is Steve Higgin. I'm a CEO and founder of Tap. Tap is an agile application platform that effectively allows you to build maintenance-free apps and then run them for 10, 20 years as long as you need, but with an AI spin on it where you can actually shift the emphasis to design and engineering and then build your enterprise apps in 60 seconds. That's Tap.
Perfect. Great to meet you all. Right. So the first question, why should leaders make data-driven decisions as opposed to data-dominated ones? And I'll start first on my left.
Okay. So data dominant decisions. So if we think about hard data, first of all, numbers, and metrics can very often overshadow lived experiences. And that qualitative data is really important. And so leaders can miss important signals and the context when making decisions. So to give you an example, so if we're thinking about D&I in particular, and I won't name the company, and it was a few years ago, but they were hyper-focused on diversity quotas for women. And they did really well. They hired lots of women, and women joined their organization. They were very sort of top heavy on the sort of men front. But after about a year or so, many of the women started leaving, and the exit interviews were showing that it was because they didn't feel supported, that it wasn't an inclusive environment. The qualitative data, so you can think, well, the engagement surveys, what did the engagement surveys say? And the engagement surveys showed that people felt valued. And the trouble was that it was aggregated up, and it was data dominance. Because of course, the majority at this company were men. So they didn't spot it in time. And it's the danger of the aggregation. Yeah. So actually disaggregating and re-aggregating across demographics, they could have driven insight earlier and did action, did something different. But I think it's more than just that as well. I think there's a constellation of data that's necessary, and triangulation. It's not easy. I probably the biggest thing I would say is that in making data-driven decisions, it's important that you create a sort of iterative process. There's a feedback loop, and that you're sort of reviewing it and sort of pivoting as you go.
Thank you. Okay, so Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers are drowning in data. So the problem is they can't see the wood for the trees. They don't know what information actually is going to help them actually make the right decisions. So that's the reason why it's so important that actually they understand the data they've got and actually the insight is going to give them. Because as we collect more and more information, it becomes more and more of a problem. So again, I think it's kind of one of those almost, I can't imagine anyone would disagree in this room. You make decisions based on the insights that you get, not by the volume of data.
Okay, and so James,
I've got the mic, so I can speak.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
this is on the mic.
Yeah, I guess I think about this in two ways. To Vicky's point, sort of like the definition of data sort of changed, right? Like we used to, if you look back far enough, just like facts and evidence, and unless there's any flat earthers here who are going to like challenge me on like scientific methods, hasn't been a good thing for us. Like that was a good way to make decisions, and then it became ones and zeros. And so to Vicky's point, when it is just ones and zeros, and you don't have a bunch of other evidence, you're making worse decisions. I guess the other thing, like implied in data domination, right, is that you're doing a bunch of work on the data side before you're taking a decision, and that this will be a recurring theme. Like at these things, I often push back against too much data and then get told off by all the data suppliers. But like you got to do a bunch of work to be data dominated, and particularly at somewhere like a high growth, fast moving, innovative bunch of mistakes company like I work at, like that often is time poorly spent, right? Like go and do a bunch of stuff, fail, and you'll learn much quicker. You'll get much higher signal to noise from then reversing back out of it. And so I think from that perspective, I don't let data dominate your decision. Don't assume you need a bunch of stuff. Don't raise the stakes too high. I would always like recommend. I think we raise the stakes too high these days around like prove me that was impactful, or show me the result of the thing. And the team then goes away and does a bunch of work to do that when they could be building something for you, right? So if you're going to ask that question in a position of like strength as a leader, where someone wants to go away and serve you, pause and think, would I rather them go and answer that question, or keep building the thing and I'll make a judgment call? And then that for me is a really good tension. You can then say, like, this was data driven, like I have a good intuition and I'm seeing a bunch of stuff that's telling me which is data that is right, but it's not dominated that I'm stopping them doing useful work.
Cool. Finally, and Drow then. So the topic of data at Prompt Bros.
Yeah, so I think the way I look at it is that with the rise of AI, it means that we are going into realms of data that we cannot really understand it. We cannot think in the dimensions that those models learn and that they actually share some of the outputs. What we need to focus on more is what are the actual, some of the metrics that we really want to drive. And we need to learn from the data, not actually go and build it. We used to build what if this, then that rules. It doesn't work when you are looking at, a set of data that goes from what you've added to a basket, what you've added to your songs that you hear, and when you do it, and all the other things that you can really get from logs. It gets to a point where your mind cannot really fathom how you got to it, because it just works in so many angles. So you need to learn the product. So that is truly what is being in the data, driven, rather than you thinking that you're gonna really answer for the data, right?
Yeah, that's cool. And as James was talking there about the data that we collect for thousands of customers, we often get in this challenge of have we got enough data, right? Especially when we get into the topic about AI. But I just wonder on your thoughts about can you have too much data, right, to help you make a decision? And I'll go straight back to Joao actually on that one.
Yeah. So depends. If you have a lot of data, but that you don't really understand what you're going to do with it. If you have quite a lot of data that you haven't done exercise to really do some of the clean so how to get some of the clean set of data that you actually can then build some actionable insights, then it's bad data that you don't want. And we saw that earlier in some of the slides that we saw earlier. But there is a rise with the data, both in the synthetic data that is going to be built by AI, and also the rise of fake data that is already being built by the bots, whether it's in the marketing side, whether it's on the internet, that it's going to be there. So you need to really try to encapsulate all of the data, but really try to separate the noise from the valuable data. But I don't know. What do you think?
Shall I go? Yeah, I think I would be more definitive and say yes, you can have too much data, and I think where it takes you is to this place of analysis paralysis and cognitive overload, and then you'll have different data sets that contradict one another, and you go, oh goodness, this is saying that and that's saying that. Let's go and get more data, right? And everyone's fearful that they haven't got enough.
Spend more time collecting
Yeah.
more data.
Spend more time, and there's gaps. And a decision needs to be made. And so then what can happen is that a person or a group of people will make the decision through their confirmation bias, right? And what that means is they will side with the data that they believe is right, and it might not be right. And I think the most important thing here is to get your question right, okay, and simplify the question. A good question will narrow down the data that you need to answer it. So a good question in my mind has 3 elements, right? The first element is a call to decision, and that will include that there's one of 3 things the call to decision is: a threat, an opportunity, or something around ethics. So what is your call to decision? Then what is the desired outcome, the change you want to see? And then what are your key metrics? And it's not all the data. What are the key ones? So I think simplifying what the question is, and then finally you can sort of hypothesize around what the decision may be, and that will also help narrow down the data sets to examine.
Okay, so think about the right way of doing that. James, you've at My Tutors, right? So general manager, must deal with lots of data about lots of courses, lots of students, lots of reviews, lots of data points. How do you manage that need to deal with all that
Badly.
data?
Yeah, I think I mean, I love Vicky's points. I think that sort of too much data rears its ugly head in 2 ways. The first is when you've done all your work to say, like, I care about these 10 things, or I'm trying to make this decision right as a leader. And then your team are debating how you define conversion rate or whatever the metric is, right? And you're like, I came here to have a conversation about the decision, and we're talking about the data. And that is just like, if that's happening, hire someone to stop that happening and just like kill it, get it out of the way. Like, to some extent, it doesn't matter. Like, you need a dashboard of which you're navigating the road by. It doesn't matter if the light comes on when it's the temperature of the engine. It probably does matter in the case. But my point is it 91 degrees or 90? Like the point is you need a dashboard, not to debate whether it's 90 or 91. And then to sort of like the other point Vicky made, or maybe to go a step further, there's this great dynamic, right? Where you as a leader, you're like, I want to make this decision. I'm empowering my data team. Help me make this decision. They come back with a bunch of data points and like, I can't take the decision with this. And you want to, it's not your fault as a leader. I mean, it's definitely your, like as a consultant, you ever say it's the leader's fault, but it is, because they're not, if you can't be really crystal clear on how you're going to take that decision, the poor person who's being asked to get data for it is scuppered, right? They can't read your mind. You're in a position to take it. They're an analyst, they don't know this thing. So I find it so helpful to just like sit down and almost that person hold you to account, right? Like, how are you going to take that decision? Walk me through it. Whatever it is, like, be transparent, put your sort of reasoning on the line, And then they understand how you're going to go through it, and then they can fill the gaps with data. And I love it. Like, massively helps me in the decisions I'm making, because that person's holding me to account. But then the data I get back is 5 more data points, like 5 data points, not 500, which step me through that process. So that's a very powerful tool for me.
Okay. And finally, Steve.
I think the interesting insight I have on this is the fact that for one of our oil and gas clients, we are capturing huge amounts of data every month. And I'd just been out to Seattle and be at a Microsoft event where they were talking about how AI is going to solve everything. And I was fortunate to be able to have a call with actually the head of AI for Microsoft. So I've got all this data. What can we do with it? I don't know. And it was really kind of poignant, because actually on the stage, I've been talking about all this insight we're going to get and all the models and what the models are going to do, but they can only do it if you've got a subject matter expert who knows what he's looking for in the first place. So again, I think part of the challenge is actually there's a lot of noise, and almost to a certain degree, the kind of the king's new clothes. Everyone's telling everyone about how everything's going to be really amazing. But in reality, you've got to put in the hard yards. You've got to understand what the data is you're looking for and then verify it. Whereas historically, you'd have people saying, right, I want huge reports. I want to be scanning through it. Well, that's just a nonsense. Everyone, as you talked about, they want dashboards and actionable insights so they can make informed decisions, but at least have a subject matter expert underpin it to make sure that we are working on real data and not what we thought we got, or a bias.
Yeah, I mean, that point about having so much data, so many reports, does anyone ever use it? I'll tell you a funny story about this. So one of our retail customers, I won't say which one it is, I was working with them a good number of years ago, and they were printing off vast amounts of reports, right? Data coming in, printing out reports. And they weren't sure if anyone ever actually looked at them. So they're a retailer, right? So they have vouchers. So they stuffed some £100 vouchers into the reports and checked if they were ever cashed in, and they weren't. So guess what? They never ran the reports again. Save the printing bill. But yeah, this whole problem of having, how much data is enough, what's too much. I see this all the time to try and understand what data do people have about their IT estate. James was talking about that. There's small organizations are probably, you've not been around long enough to have forgotten about how your IT estate works. But that's a big problem in the IT industry. So companies that have been around for a while, they don't know what's there, right? So it makes it impossible to plan for change, because you don't know what you've got, right? So you've got to do some archaeology from a data perspective and try and understand what you've got, try and synthesize that together, try and get some insight, and then get everyone together and say, are we all sure about how we're going to make this change? Because this data is going to underpin it. And often what we find is that the data they have doesn't support what they need to do. So there's a problem of, right, but what's the right dashboards? Or, if anyone's ever remembered, there's a Ben Elton sketch from Whenever buying a bigger bin, right? So collect more data. You just buying a bigger bin. At some point, you've got to empty the bin and figure out what we're going to do with all the stuff that's in that. So cool. Right. Sorry, I'll stop rambling now. It sounds like a comedy show. Right. Talking about the tools then. So what tools do you guys actually use then to get your insights? And Steve, what sort of tools do you use at TAP, or even personally?
Yeah, so the TAP platform is effectively almost an orchestration layer. So we're able to then tap into whatever is the right tool for the right job. And a lot of the time, customers have actually got their own data stored away in either SQL or some sort of other kind of database storage system. And we're able to then leverage that and then bring it to life very quickly. And I guess that's the key bit. There's lots of data. People already have lots of data, but it's how they interact with it, how they pull it together from lots of different systems. So for us, what we're finding is that actually people are using our technology to build the custom solutions they need. They're using no-code technology to do that faster and quicker, and then actually using it as a fail-fast model. So if you pull the data together and you show it to people and nobody believes it, then actually find out why. And then if you do believe it, then keep moving forwards. And it's a bit like an onion skin. The more insight you need, you peel back and you just go down and down. But you don't end up doing, as I've seen with a number of customers, a huge data scientist team come in, they try and understand what the data is, and they just come back 6 months later, scratching their head, say, well, actually, you should really start cleaning the data from this point onwards. So we've seen that countless times. So again, it's just using the appropriate tools, and obviously with the various AI models that are coming out, they're helping to cleanse it, provide the information in a way that actually then users can consume.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, and it's that, like I said, it's the onion skin, right? But some of it is technology, but also some of it is age as well, right? Because there'll be data out there that might be. I was talking to someone earlier about mainframe stuff, right? So there'll be data that's mainframe based, and then as the more fashions that come along, right, it's another data source. So it's understanding all of that stuff as well. Joao, what do you do for tooling at Prompt Bros?
Yeah, so we are one of the tools, right? So we can be used for some of those aspects where it is to actually have some of data be, analyzed by the models, um, by all of the models which are out there. Whether you want to actually build some of the data so that you can actually validate and do some of the testing for the features that you want to launch. But we are one of the tools. I think for any of the business that actually is really wanting to move into using vast amount of data and AI, not just in the Gen AI, but ML, you need both those both in the sets of the tools that will extract data, clean up, etc. You'll need to actually have humans in the loop that will help to really validate and do some of the labeling of the data. You need to find what is the set of data that when you run it, it's actually going to meet your outcome. And only then, when you are really sure, can you actually run one of those, uh, in a real life use case. You can actually run it with the safety and some of the confidence that you're actually going to get those outputs. Because once the model is out there, how are you going to know? You are going to have many other tools to get data back, but you need to be sure that once you've set it out there, that it's at least well enough oiled that it's going to not ruin what it is that you're trying to do, right? If you want to drive some of the customers to shop more, you want to make sure that what you're going to put in front of them is something that the similar set of the customers with the similar set of data is actually going to want to buy. And for that, you need quite a lot of the tooling. Don't do it all at once, is what I would say. Go small, start with humans really validating the data, start with actually, you look at the data, try to clean it, try to get some labels, then run a few models, run a few workflows. Don't launch it one at all for everything that you want to achieve as a business, and then learn, right? I think that that's quite important, is that you will always be learning, because both the data and what you thought was good is going to evolve, because we don't know what users are going to do in a month's time, in a year's time, right? So it's not something that you set up once and it's set for life. You keep evolving, you keep iterating. So yeah.
I've got a follow-on question on that. So how would you then, I guess the challenge of some of this is there's a sort of deep data science, explaining that to a non-technical leader. Joao, I mean, we can maybe add some of this on, but is this something that you have fun with, sort of trying to explain, all
It's
of this?
very hard, I would say, and I think that it first will begin with quite a lot of the use cases that we are, asked of, aren't things that you should be solving with, AI. So we always have to say, well, this part that you're actually trying to do, you probably want a human there, but there are certain things that you can do maybe in one step earlier or one step afterwards, that you can actually augment what it is that you're doing, whether it's through some of the clustering to be smarter, some of the analysis to be smarter, some of the labeling to be done kind of automatically. So I think that there is quite a deep education curve on some of those elements, and some of it's tooling, but some of it's just education, and really some of the chats through it to like get people to understand what AI in whatever sense, whether it's in the Gen AI or not, what it can do and what it can't do.
Sort of like the concept of augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
Sort of one for leaders. Okay, cool. James, so what's the
I'm a
tooling?
big tooling skeptic, so I don't want to answer the
Okay.
question. Primarily because I just think the tooling debate often gets in the way of the goal of the decision, right? And it's so easy. It's like lovely to come in and criticize the tool, do a 3-year implementation, get paid, and then see a bunch of other new problems. Some quite nervous chuckles in the room. Like you've got to pick a tool, but you've got to, I guess, like change how your business is going to operate. I guess to some of what James was speaking about earlier, like that is the thing you've really got to work hard on and work hard on, like on getting right. And there's a part of that is data literacy. Like there's just a bunch of stuff in there which isn't sort of the tooling discussion that really matters. And this is where I get slapped on the wrist by data vendors again. I guess the really self-serve is the goal, and we want everyone to be in a position to be empowered to make decisions with data at their fingertips. I think the thing that I've come across, like, it's not to be taken on half-heartedly, right? It's like if you do it badly, it's almost a worse outcome because you're giving people cars and not teaching them to drive, right? Whatever it is. And I think the thing that's quite interesting with like the push to self-serve is that it sort of distributes your data resource a bunch across your organization way too thinly. Like if you've maybe got like a handful of really high stakes decisions you've got to make in the next quarter to hit your goals. And if those are driving 80% of your outcomes, I bet 80% of your data resource isn't allocated there, right? Because there's 20 people in marketing asking for data to run a campaign and a bunch of stuff like that. And so by trying to self-serve your organization, you're just like pulling your data team so thinly. And so sort of an alternate view, which is, I think, great for certain organizations, is just like get your leadership to decide, like, these are the 3 problems we're going to solve. We're going to throw all of our data resource at it. And there's a good chance, I think, you get better outcomes for it. And then also the tooling, it's often a bunch cheaper because you don't have to self-serve your org. But I won't get thanked for saying that.
Okay, so a tooling skeptic. Are there any tooling vendors in the room? All right, they're being quiet if they are. Okay, so we've been through a few topics there. So too much data, a bit about tooling, and do we have too much data? Not enough. Where is it? How do we categorize it? Etc. All of this is quite complicated, and then you layer on top all the buzzwords about Gen AI, right? So at the board level, Gen AI is going to be the next great thing for the company, going to save everyone's careers and send the share price rocketing through the roof. But the reality is a bunch of that is going to need people to understand what all this data stuff is. And I have conversations with customers about their aspirations about Gen AI, but they really don't have a clue what data they've got, where it is, who owns it, all the problems we've been talking about. But the problem about people understanding some of this is a challenge, right? So I guess from you folks as leaders, what do you think about the topic of literacy, data literacy, and getting people to understand the topic? So Vicky, I guess.
So the term data literacy is problematic for me, actually. Sort of outside of data and tech and marketing, probably, and perhaps a few other departments. The word data, I think, I've seen like people just go, oh, data, yes, data driven, yes. But, if you ask them to actually get their hands dirty with data, they're a bit scared. And then you use the word literacy and like the shutters come down. And it's like, okay, well, so let's use a different word then. But understanding data and what it can do and the power of data is so important. And leaders play such a large role in that. So, if you're top leaders who cast very big footprints, right, in the sand, if they're not using data to make decisions, then you can't expect their people to do that either. And so it's so important that leaders understand how to use data, but also the dangers of data. And we've talked about some of those
You look
things.
at the right data, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. The dangers, the driving those actionable insights and the quality of the data, and knowing that it's only as good as the data. And back to the tooling point, there are tools that can help with data quality. And also, data has become is everywhere at the moment. So if I think about Sainsbury's and the sort of data that would be useful to store colleagues on the shop floor, marketing analysts, of course, and leaders who are making decisions, everyone sort of needs a certain level of data literacy. And then that's education and different types of education. And there's a standard sort of GDPR type education that people need to go through, but actually utilizing data on a day-to-day basis and empowering people to use it as well. Because I think if everyone can do it, then I think kind of the world's the limit.
Well, it's a bit, yeah. So you stop it being scary, right? And I think you have the point about, so the term data literacy might have a bit of stigma about it, right? So you might people might sound, they don't want to sound illiterate. So you want to get them to use that. We have a thing with, somebody came up with I don't like the term, but James talking about our bridge platform, and the mantra from New York for us now is bridge for breakfast. But the I, which is a bit cheesy, but what it's trying to do is to drive our leaders to actually look at the data about our customers on a daily basis. So come in every day, understand what's going on, right? So which things on the dashboard are red, which ones are grey, which means they're good. And when you have a conversation with a customer, it means, or even with our own teams, it means we've got a bit of context, right? So because we don't, we've got lots of people that we look after, lots of customers, but we want our teams to be actually really au fait with the data about that customer on a day-to-day basis. So it helps everyone, get on there. But I don't know. I'll pass back to Steve. Any thoughts about data literacy and awareness in your organisation or others?
Yeah, I think the interesting kind of example for us was we did some work in an NHS government digital exemplar hospital, and we were brought in by the digital transformation manager, and I assumed wrongly that actually they'd nailed data. It was Excel hell everywhere, and they were running a hospital on Excel, and they were basically doing a ward round. And in the morning, they were writing down on sheets of paper. So it's a bit like we're standing here, writing on their arms, and it was crazy. And then they're going in and entering it into a spreadsheet, and they printed it out. And then they actually then walked to the discharge hub. They put it into an in tray. And you can imagine, as technologists, we were sort of dumbfounded. Like, why'd you do that? Well, because you get so many emails coming in, and there's so many updates on the Excel spreadsheet, she's not sure which is the right one to fill in. So the process was, we've gone back to literally paper. And what was interesting is when we sat down with the doctors and nurses about, well, what do you need of a digital system to run the ward? Well, basically the Excel sheet we're filling in, but real time. They literally had people in the discharge hub on all day Monday, just typing in, consolidating all this information. They never put it into the electronic patient record system because no one touched that, because that's just rubbish. So they couldn't use it. It didn't map to the medical pathways that they were operating against. And we were just sitting there thinking, hang on, this is meant to be the best of the best, the top 15. This was one of the top 15 in the country, and the rest of them are still fighting with Excel. But the interesting thing about it from a data literacy point of view was the fact that actually the doctors and nurses knew exactly what they wanted, and all they needed was someone to basically turn that into a system, which we did in 4 weeks, and flipped it from paper to digital. And now everyone in the hospital actually had the data, the insight that they needed in real time. So it's one of those things that we often see within organizations. The business and the people in the systems, so the business users who are using the data actually understand the value and the potential of it. The challenge they've got is actually how do they turn it into a digital system that gives them the real-time ability to make the decisions they make. Business people understand about the literacy and the value of it. The challenge is actually how they turn it into something useful. In the value of it, the challenge is actually how they turn it into something useful.
Yeah, and we got through most of the evening before we mentioned Excel, right? So, it's on everyone's. The great thing is it's on everyone's laptops or desktop, right? The worst thing is it's on everyone's desktop or laptop. So give someone an Excel. Here's a copy of Excel. The next thing you know, they're a DBA, database designer, entering data with no change. There's no audit trail of what changed, and massively complicated Excel spreadsheets that no one understands how they work. Yeah. Businesses based on them. So it's and that's a problem. That's a reality that we need to try and work through. Joao, data literacy.
Yeah, so I think that everyone knows that as a leader in a company, you are going to cast a shadow or set some of the um, guidance on the culture that kind of everyone has. And if you shy away from actually understanding both the data, some of the new emerging set of the concepts that are out there, and you just use anecdotal bad evidence of, okay, I asked this from AI and it came up with a wrong answer. Well, you didn't really do enough of a job to really understand how it should be used. You shouldn't use in the Gen AI for everything. You shouldn't use ML for everything. You shouldn't use some of the old style, just pure calculus for everything, right? So when you set what is the strategy, I think that you need to really be embracing some of the technology, because younger people in your organization will see the value, right? Whether they're in engineering, whether they're in sales, whether they're in marketing, they will want to make their lives easier, and they will see how some of the maybe larger, more tech savvy companies and some of the big ones out there are actually doing, because they're building out in the public. They're building through open source as well. So you need to keep up with the times. You need to really drive that culture to kind of embrace data, the technology, and the changes that you're going to have to do, as an organization, to really thrive in the future. Because maybe you will hang on for a bit. Yes, you will. But in maybe 5 years, 10 years, maybe not so much. So, I think that, as a leader, we all need to do that role.
I think it's incumbent on all of us to understand some of these topics, right? Even if it's hard. Okay, finally, last but not least, James.
I'm really happy because we've heard calculus and Excel on this question. All good place. Yeah. You know where this is. You know where this is going. Yes. Yeah. Excel. The merits of Excel. Yeah. So I guess the first point, which we touched on earlier, would be like, I see the democratization of data moving so much faster than data literacy, right? And that's just playing with fire, like slow down that thing. I think so. Vicky's point on like, what do we mean by data literacy? Actually, like a bunch of it. I mean, there's a practical example. My tutor, when we were early stage, everyone had to learn SQL. Like we couldn't self-serve, so everyone was writing SQL code to serve their roles, and they basically could only be successful in their role if they could do that. And so they were really motivated to do it, and they got quite, like, it was good. But the mistake I made in that was that actually, like, there's a bunch of mathematical literacy which we seem to separate often from data literacy. And like, yes, like you can pull the data, but if you don't understand some basic calculus or linear algebra, like you're still dangerous, right? If you can find a statistical significance calculator online, you're really bloody dangerous. Please send it. So there's just a bunch of stuff there to, like, I guess, like hold back. I like, great if your leaders, if you can have a couple of wizards in your organization who are incredibly data literate, and a couple of them are in your leadership team, fantastic. I think you're doing really well. And I do think, I wonder if, like, data literacy is like a very fashionable thing, and like, you don't often talk about maybe like financial literacy or revenue literacy or some of those things. And I would love data teams to better understand how a company makes money than the whole of the company who's making money know how to do data. And so, like, if I don't know, a really powerful tool I find is just so that if you can scribe or describe how your company works, and that's part of your onboarding, and like that is often mathematical, right? Like your P&L is a bunch of numbers. But if you can describe that to everyone in the organization, they can then do their jobs way better and make a bunch of decisions with an intuition of, oh, well, if I retain a customer, it is 3 times more valuable than acquiring a customer. Like, some of those intuitions are built in because they understand how you make revenue, and data literacy sort of misses that judgment a little bit. So I'd start, it's not to say literacy doesn't matter, but I think sort of down the stack of things you should be educating your people on.
Perfect. Thank you. Right. Yeah, questions from the audience.
you have any questions?
Go on then, Neil.
Always got a question. So, thinking forward 10 years, okay, with your wisdom and your insight, how do you see us overcoming the sort of complexity bomb that we have with all the data and tools that we have in the world of sort of multimodal AI data and everybody having telemetry going in and out of their chips in their brains? Where do you see the future in a positive way or a negative
Maybe
way?
can I, it's not going to be easy. We shouldn't be trying to really pace what, AI and all of the data that we gather is doing. But I think we're going to have folk that used to be doing some of the manual work to look more at actually what is the output from some of those, from some of those outputs from, AI, whether it's through automated sets of data that are, both in the labeled or some of the annotations. There's a lot of big tech organizations who are actually having people that used to be doing quite a lot of work to actually, output stuff, content, where their work is now to check the output to say, this one's great, this one, not so much. Maybe look at your favorite, audio, company from some of the streaming that they're out there. They have open, some of the podcasts, out there, which share how your favorite tunes, whether it's on the weekly, list that you have, it's actually helped by people as well. So the humans are in the loop. But to your point, we're not going to try to outpace it. It's really just trying to see if AI is doing its job, if the automation is working, right?
Yeah, I'd add to that, actually, going back to the data literacy point we were talking about earlier on. How much training do people get in organizations about understanding what this means? The problem is that actually new tool comes along. I was at an event at London Stock Exchange recently, and the SVP for Shell leant over to the Microsoft people and said, Copilot, most of my people put one query in, get a load of nonsense back, and they don't use it again. And that's part of the problem, is that if you're not getting the right training and you're getting the right insight, you're not really elevating your knowledge around actually how you could improve your process, your IP, and a better understanding of the business. So where people are doing a lot of this kind of drudgy work, that's actually not really kind of particularly satisfying from an individual point of view. You can elevate them up a level by actually learning and teaching them how to use the tools more effectively. So coming back to the point you talked about there, Neil, I think it's about actually empowering people to actually then use the tools to learn how they are effective, but also where they're not.
Let's riff on this a bit, as I think it's a really, it's cool. We're already starting to see what I think will be quite a meaningful change in like who is valuable and who like the skills that make you valuable in an organization from there. And then there are a bunch of people, like a lot of this group will have been very successful because data was often the gatekeeper to the decisions, right, in the past. And so you had a lot of power in that skill set. And now data is rarely the gatekeeper, and actually like synthesizing it suddenly is this, I think, the rarest, like the hardest commodity to come across in your organization, right? You know the people, and they can be at all layers of your organization. You sort of like look at the thing slightly blurry-eyed and go like, that's the thing. And you're like, wow. And I think if we can train that, but also elevate those people to decision-making positions quickly, like that's, I just believe that's something you're going to see changing quite materially, because to your point, we're not going to outpace it. There's so much information. We just got to synthesize it a bunch faster.
I sort of looking to the future, and you could, no one's got a crystal ball, and we don't know what step change is next. And there may be some amazing sort of technology advancements, but data really, it goes back years, right? When we were working at Sainsbury's, you hold data aggregated, of course, right? GDPR and all of that, but it goes back years, and it sits on tech stacks that in some cases go back years as well, right? And you modernize, and that's a big project, and it's hard, and it's transformation, and you get it to a new platform, and like, great, and now we can use Gen AI, and we put questions in that are going to stop our servers going down. Or there was a question earlier up there that I saw. But I think that's what's going to really hold us back. And, and I was having a chat earlier with someone around tech debt, if you don't keep up and on top of tech debt, then the data will remain where it is and you won't be able to mine it. So even if step change technologies arrive. So yeah, that's a bit pessimistic, I'm afraid, but
but probably valid, right? So
It's not access.
Microsoft Access, no. So give me a minute. We meet, yeah. So I think the challenge is sort of if history is a indicator of future performance as an industry, we've not been very good about clearing up behind ourselves. So your point there, Vicky, about the tech debt, right? So there'll be systems that were built in the 60s, and and then we just added some. That was one mainframe in the 60s, right? And then some Unix boxes in the 70s, and then maybe a few more Unix boxes or mini systems in the 80s, and then an explosion of Windows boxes in the 90s, and right, and then we have virtualization. Now that's easier, right? Now we've got containers, and now we got right, but we're pretty crap as an industry about cleaning up behind us. So the worry would be that AI just, and especially if there is, everyone's it's an arms race to deploy AI, right? Everyone wants first mover advantage, but no one seems to be making a vast amount of money out of it yet, right? Except Nvidia, right? So their stock price is accelerating, right? So I think there's a thing, right? So as leaders, right, what are we doing about making sure that the AI thing and the data that underpins it doesn't become the next sort of layer on the onion, right? Or the next furball that we forget about in the corner of the data center when the next thing comes along, right? Because this is the technology du jour right now, but it will be surpassed, right? But it will be surpassed, but if we don't turn it off, we'll be generating tokens for Gen AI queries, consuming vast amounts of electricity, spewing out vast amounts of carbon, and we just made the problem worse, right? So that's I don't have an answer for it. Maybe we can ask ChatGPT how we fix that problem. A bit of a meta question for ChatGPT, but that's just sort of the realism, right? Of how as an industry, how do we make sure that we clean up after ourselves once these workloads, everyone is super excited about the conception and birth of a new workload, but no one thinks about its middle age, retirement, and eventual death. Oh, that's a bit dark, isn't it? Anyway,
It's a very pessimistic panel, that.
I've been your guest panel first and last. That was the last time ever I'll be here. No, any more questions from the audience? Or are we out of time? One more. Go on. One over.